Indie rock veterans, the Wombats, are back with a brand new album, Oh, the Ocean.
It's been a couple of years since we've last heard from the Wombats, and one thing that I notice about this band is just how consistent they are. They release albums every 2 or 3 years or so, and I wouldn't say that they've really got any album in their discography that is particularly a flop. Now, for a lot of bands in that genre and from that era of music, they've either stopped making music or they've fallen off entirely, so these boys have got longevity.
Especially because they've stayed in a relatively similar soundscape. Obviously, on this record, which we'll touch on soon, there's a few songs that kind of experiments a little bit more electronic, etc. But generally, the Wombats, every album just have 2 or 3 indie bangers that always do well, and they're loved across the entire UK. If you see them at a festival, the vibes are immaculate. And we have actually had the Wombats on the podcast. So if you're a fan of indie music, make sure you hit like and subscribe. But Tim, should we jump into the first track on this album?
Let's do it. Sorry, I'm late. I didn't want to come. And just off the bat, I think everybody can relate to that title. There's a lot of times where you're late to something, and in reality, you didn't want to be there.
See, I think that this song almost felt a little bit dreamy. You know, in the production, it felt a bit spacey, but it was a really calm introduction to the album, and I think it kind of set you off on the right path.
There was a lot of panning used throughout it, so instruments would go from your left ear to your right ear. Really enjoyed that, gave it kind of an ethereal feel. There was lo-fi filtered drums going on, paired against the nice clean guitar and bass, worked really well. Let's move on to the next track, which is Can't Say No. And there was a lot of fun lyrics and a big fun sound on this one.
It was good. It certainly stepped up the tempo. Not too much, just a nice little step up. This type of indie track is exactly what I want and what I expect when I come into a Wombats album. Like we just alluded to, they always do it so well. The vocals in this were really good, especially on the chorus. I think it's another good indie bop.
Yeah, every instrument has a chance to shine on this track. The mastering's done really well, so nothing is really drowned out in the mix. And yeah, all around decent track. We move on to Blood on the Hospital Floor. Ooh.
What I quite liked about this section of the album was it's like we had a calm introduction, we stepped it up slightly with Can't Say No, and then we stepped it up again with Blood on the Hospital Floor. This was so energetic, and I would go as far to say this is one of my favourite songs on the album. It's probably one of the most kind of energy filled in the entire project. The drumming is fantastic. I think if you dive into that when you're listening to it in the mix, the drumming is special, but just a great song.
Yeah, I'd say this is definitely the highest energy track on the entire album, and to me, right off the bat, it just felt like classic Wombat vibes. This just felt like, you know, they've captured their sound again. They know what they're doing. They've got a formula, and it works, so why change from it too much? I really, really loved the distorted guitar solo that came in at around 2 minutes. That was really nice.
And the next track has a really weird title, Kate Moss. Kate Moss is an old model, isn't she?
Yeah, she is, yeah. I think she was with Pete Doherty at some point. So, that makes sense if you're in the indie scene, and I suppose so.
Bro's just had a revelation within the video.
There's great lyrics on this track, though, in there. It's very, very fun. And something about the instrumental on it really resonated with me, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was.
Well, it was more of like an electronic style instrumental, wasn't it? And I think that after having kind of an opening This Is the Wombats section, this switched the album up really nicely. And I like the fact that they're still willing to test kind of different sounds within their genre. Produced really well. Instrumental was a cool change.
Yeah, next track comes in like a gut punch, and it is gut punch. Really catchy chorus on this one. Great drums. A great track, in my opinion.
See, I noticed the bass on this. It was funky. It added a different element to it. It was still kind of on that electronic vibe of Kate Moss. And again, I think that this made the album flow really well, where they switched it up and went, no, we'll stick with this a little bit more energy. But I feel like with a lot of these tracks, especially as we get later down the album, there's not like a whole lot to say that we haven't just said about the previous tracks, but that doesn't stop them from being good. And this was an example of that for me. But My Head Is Not My Friend is up next.
I really liked how the guitar and bass contrasted on this one. You had the guitar working some upwards patterns and the bass working some downward patterns in tandem with each other, and it's just a treat for the ears.
So for me, I think my favourite element of this song, it really kind of slowly built up to moments of high energy where it's kind of made you feel relieved that we actually got there. Do you know what I mean? When it's like, ooh, and then we hit the climax, and it was worth it. A great song. This was one of the singles as well. I can see why they picked it. Wombats coded.
There was an energy injection at around 2:40 that, like you're saying, we built up to, and I felt like even though it was about 4 minutes in runtime, it didn't overstay its welcome because of that last minute, because it had the energy build up, and then when it hit that, it kind of, you needed the time time to fully appreciate what they'd worked up to. So very nice.
I Love America and She Hates Me is up next. Then I've got to mention it because I feel like this might be a 1975 reference.
So in my head, I was like, I know that name. Like, is that a song that they did?
Did the 1975 have a song called I Like America and America Likes Me?
That's it, yeah.
So that seems very similar. But to me, I would actually say this is the weakest point on the album so far. This song felt very one-dimensional to me. It's produced well again, as the entire album is, but it's certainly not got replayability for me.
No, I'd say it's like a funky head bopper. It kind of gets you moving, but it didn't really feel too much like Wombats. And for me, that's just a little bit of a miss, so I agree.
It was one of those, the instrumental kind of picked up and added some more interesting elements in the last 45 seconds, but for it, I kind of had to wait till that point for it to really perk my interest. So we'll go on to the next song, which is The World's Not Out to Get Me, I Am.
Just going to point out the sick-ass guitar solo on this one at around 2:20 as well, because throughout this album, there is a lot of great work from all instruments involved, and I just think they deserve some credit.
The feel of this song was really hard to pin down for me. It kind of felt like an old school American rock song, but at the same time, when it started and it was just that guitar, I thought it was going to proper pop off, and it didn't really.
I've got it down that this song feels like it was inspired by Stone Roses, because there is kind of that like slightly ethereal instrumental vibe to it, but the vocals, something about it just felt a bit not really fool's gold, just something that I could hear the Stone Roses putting out.
Yeah, it was fine. We're up next with Grim Reaper. What do you rate that one, Tim?
The lo-fi drums are back again, and I really enjoy them. Really nice, very good and clean bass and guitar again. Yeah, chorus is catchy. It's decent. It's all right.
My entire description for this song is weak.
Oh,
I didn't think there was much to it.
I thought the chorus was really good.
Nah, it was all right. There was no point in it did I get excited or interested, really.
Yeah, fair.
So I'll just be honest with that one. Up next is Reality is a Wild Ride. There's a lot of long and strange song titles in this album.
Feels like mid-2000s alternative albums, like early Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco. But yeah, this track kind of had a little bit of an elbow vibe to it. Something about it felt a bit more calmer. It was interesting, and it sounds simple on the surface, but when you properly listen to it, there is so many layers going on and a lot of instrumentation on top of each other. Now with the other tracks, there's obviously they're introducing the electronic sound a little bit more in these later albums, but something about this track, it was built up with many, many layers, like an ogre, like an onion. They have layers.
Damn. I thought that this was more unique in comparison to a lot of the other songs, probably kind of alluding to what you're saying there. There was the guitar throughout this was kind of wobbly, reverby. What's it when you hit the
whammy bar?
Yeah, it kind of sounded like they were hitting the whammy bar a lot during this. I liked that. It sounded like a cool test. No issues with this song, so we'll go on to the next one, which is Swerve 101.
I didn't know, this is definitely not a reference to Swerve Strickland from AEW. But the intro on this one caught me off guard. It was a very off-key sound, kind of using different chords that you wouldn't expect. Usually the Wombats have got quite a major chord progression, but this was a bit dingy and a bit scary almost. Obviously it wasn't scary, but for the Wombats I felt like they'd really tried something different with this one.
Especially in the flow of the album as well, I thought that this injected a bit of much needed energy. I was kind of getting to the point where I was like, all right, we're just hearing very similar sounds over and over again. This came back a slightly higher tempo, still not as energetic as the first couple songs we got, but it was good.
Yeah, there was some swelling across the first minute or so where it just built and went down and built and went down. And something that I then realised at this point, are they doing this swelling and this panning because it's the ocean? So are they trying to emulate the ocean slightly? But there was one line in this that really made me laugh, which was, we've got TikTok models with all their slippery morals. And I thought that's a great line.
That is a good one. I do want to point out, as I have in a few tracks, I think the drumming in this song was fantastic again. I think throughout this album, there's been a few elements you can pick out, but I do think the drum performance has been fantastic. But we'll move on to the last song in Lobster. But before you give your thoughts, Tim, if you have got to this point in the video, make sure to hit like and subscribe. But Lobster.
Spacey vibes, very ethereal. This is the longest track on the album, but I do think that it works really nicely as an outro because it just kind of, it keeps going. They add a little bit of something else. They take something away. It keeps your attention. perfect ending.
I thought it was a great way to end the album as well. As you say, lots of different elements coming in and out, and it kind of feels like the culmination of not particularly tests throughout the album, but all the different sounds that they've kind of gone in and out of have been built up into this one ending song. I really liked it, but we've hit the end, Tim, so give me some thoughts on the album as a whole.
As I mentioned at the beginning, this band is very, very consistent and perhaps the most consistent of their generation. And I think this album just adds to the discography of, you know, albums that are great. They've not really had a miss, and this album is not a miss by any marks.
For me, I think the start of the album, the first 4 songs, really strong. And then I think we hit a little bit of a lull in the middle, but that lull was not offensive. It's not something I'd go, oh, turn this off. It was more just like, it's okay. And then the last couple songs really piqued my interest again. So it was, I don't know what I expected, but just that lull in the middle kind of disappointed me. It didn't feel particularly unique in any way, but it wasn't annoying.
Yeah, it didn't feel like they were purposefully adding a lull in there. It just felt like that was the way that the album was going. And yeah, I think there was a lot of great hooks throughout this album as well. A lot of good choruses that I really enjoyed. And for me, usually I'm not that I'm not a fan of choruses, but I do tend to find that I dislike more than I like. But with this one, there was a lot more hooks and choruses on it where I thought, you know, that's actually really good. But these guys are phenomenal songwriters, and they have been for years. They've been in the game for so long. They know exactly what they're doing. And this is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, I've got nothing but love and respect for the Wombats. As you say, I think that this is another good album to add to their discography. But how good is it, Tim?
I would say that this album, out of 10, I would give it a solid 7. 7 out of 10 from me.
2 reviews in a row, we've come with exactly the same score. 7 out of 10 from me as well. Solid, really enjoyed elements of it, but think there could have been a little bit of improvement in areas.
I have to add in this that I do prefer this album over their previous album. Not necessarily the last album was bad, but I did think this was a return to form for me.
And if you enjoyed this video, please do remember to hit like and subscribe. We will leave our episode with the Wombats linked at the end, so check that out. I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
Thank you very much for watching.